This is your news. 4 News Tonight.
When the cry went up that a serial killer was on the loose, police said ridiculous. That was a year and a half ago.
Tonight, some police investigators are the ones talking about a serial killer, about one person and as many as 8 unsolved murders. Esme Murphy has more about the evidence and why it has taken so long for police to acknowledge it.
Most of the murders have been back-page news or not reported at all. Martha Ann Bacon's murder received the most publicity, largely because her mutilated body parts were found by a dog in Wright County. Today, for the first time, law enforcement officials met to discuss the possibility that some of the more than 8 murders may be connected. Afterward, police refused to comment.
Again, we see that the cause of death was strangulation.
Evelina Giobbi, the director of Whisper, an organization directed at helping prostitutes, has kept careful notes on 8 prostitute murders she believes are related. Whisper believes police have failed to investigate these murders thoroughly.
I'm not surprised, by the way, that MPD did not initiate this. We've received nothing but denial and dismissal from the Minneapolis Police Department when we've suggested for almost 3 years now that these murders were connected.
The files begin with 3 murders in Minneapolis in September of 1992. The last murder was in June of 1993. Giobbi says the factors linking the murders include where the women worked. Many plied their trade on East Lake Street. Most of them had been mutilated, and the cause of their death was strangulation. Clearly now, police are exploring the possibility of a connection. But sources say some Minneapolis investigators disagree and believe there is no link, as this investigator told us in 1993. Is there any possibility that any of these cases are connected?
Absolutely not. There are a lot of differences, and basically the 2 similarities of the cases are the fact that they were prostitutes and they had death by strangulation. And not all the strangulation was even the same.
But other investigators believe 3 of the murders now may be linked. The big question that we really don't know the answer to is why this sudden investigative interest in these relatively older murder cases. The police are saying they've been looking at these cases all along. But Don, they aren't saying whether there is something else that has triggered their interest.
Okay, thank you. Esme Murphy reporting.
Today, a plan to reduce the prison sentence of some convicted criminals drew an angry response from county attorneys and others. The Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission held a hearing on its plan to set less violent criminals free earlier so the state won't have to build more prison space. More space is needed if they want to lock up the most violent offenders for a longer time under a get tough on crime measure like 3 strikes and you're out. But other critics say longer sentences simply don't deter crime.
And the experience in state after state, whether Texas, California, Michigan, whatever, is that longer, ever-increasing sentences has not increased the public safety.
But the state legislature becomes the final decision maker in whether sentences will in fact be reduced.
One more update. Remember last night we were talking about the Federal Reserve raising interest rates to keep inflation low? Well, inflation is low. We learned today that consumer prices rose just 0.1% last month. But the Fed's logic is to act now to keep those prices low.
In local headlines, the work of a few vandals shut down school for an entire town. The vandalism happened overnight at the Nicollet Public School. It was a brief rampage, spray painting, scattering papers, smashing a window here or there. It was enough to close school for the day, but one day's hard work was enough to get school ready to resume tomorrow.
Another troubling story from overnight, this one over in Arden Hills. Scott Reynolds reports that a family there owe their lives to the simplest safety device in their home.
The charred remains probably would have included human remains if it hadn't been for smoke detectors. And just days ago, the McGuire family checked all their detectors and put in some new batteries.
Heard the noise of the smoke alarm and thought it was my alarm clock until I finally figured out what was going on.
What happens if you don't have smoke alarms?
None of us would have survived this fire if it had not been for the smoke alarms. We're convinced of that. Oh, yeah.
All 6 of them made it to safety, but they lost virtually everything, right down to the kids' favorite sneakers.
The McGuires had moved to California, but they missed this area so much they decided to move back here this summer, and they bought the only house up for sale in this neighborhood. And now that it's gone up in flames, they're even more convinced they made the right decision.
That's because within hours, the kids had just about everything they needed to feel right at home, at the neighbors, even some new shoes.
They've found a place for us to stay temporarily, and the neighbors have given us food and clothing. It's just been a wonderful outpouring of support.
The McGuires did manage to salvage the family photo albums, all 13 of them. And thanks to smoke detectors, they'll be filling a lot more. Scott Reynolds, 4 News Tonight.
The McGuires had fire insurance, and they should be back in a new home at the same location within 6 months. And they say that they never plan to move again, especially because of all that support that they've received from their neighbors.
Good for them. Updates on a couple of ongoing stories. Now, the man police say they caught in the act of spray-painting anti-Semitic graffiti on a Jewish school is now charged with first-degree criminal damage to property. Michael Wayne Goodis is self-described leader of the local Nazi party. And for those of you interested in labor relations, former dancers at the Minneapolis nightclub Deja Vu have agreed to settle their lawsuit through arbitration rather than a jury trial. The women are suing to collect back pay, among other things.
We also have an update on the battle to build a casino in Hudson, Wisconsin. Today, the plan to build a casino at St. Croix Meadows Dog Track won endorsement from the director of the Minneapolis Bureau of Indian Affairs. That may carry some weight in persuading the U.S. Interior Department to okay the deal. But there are less controversial ways to attract a crowd. The city of St. Paul fired up its holiday lights display tonight. More than 600,000 lights.
I'm pretty handy with the glue gun.
Thanks, but I think I got